Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. Today, we'll hear from the Managing Director of Akora Resources, Mr. Paul Bibby. We'll be talking about the completion of the recent drilling campaign at the Bekisopa Iron Ore Project. To talk about the outstanding results and the future of the project, I'll hand it over to Paul.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. Firstly, I want to touch on the announcement that we put out yesterday around the end of drilling and what that all means for us, and the impact that that's having on the timing of releasing the maiden JORC resource. And then I've got a few slides which I'd like to go through so everyone's up to speed with how we see the resource at Bekisopa shaping up. So firstly, yesterday's announcement was pleasing. We finished the 5,000 metres of drilling over the last 5 months at Bekisopa. And as you saw in the announcement on the 9th of November, we have a series of very deep drill holes. In the north, the drill holes numbered 52 and 53, which we reported on last week, had depths down to 260 metres, and the intercept in drill hole number 53, it finished in iron ore at 250 metres with an intercept of 115 metres, which is pretty impressive. And drill hole 52 had an intercept of 138 metres and finished at 161 metres. So what we've been doing in the drilling is when we pass through the iron mineralisation, we keep drilling for 10 metres. And if we're out of the iron mineralisation for 10 metres, we end the hole, as was shown with drill hole 53 in the north. So the last 6 holes at Bekisopa have all been very deep holes in the south. And it's really proven up quite an extensive area of resource there, both in length and width, and now in thickness with these deep holes. The deep holes were at 172 metres, 186, drill hole number 61 at 204 metres. So what that means is the mineralisation finished about 190, 194 metres, and then the drill hole finished at 204. So again, we've got a lot of metres of iron mineralisation to log, to do magnetic susceptibility measurements on, to confirm the presence of the iron, and then photograph and cut the core and prepare it for assaying. So as a result of that, the resource that we're doing, we're hoping to have finished by the end of this year, won't be completed until the new year, just because of the volume of work. And that's come from 2 reasons. Firstly, we extended the number of metres we drilled at Bekisopa from 4,000 to 5,000 to take advantage of the weather, the setup of the camp and everything else, but also because we were seeing such good intercepts and we wanted to have the most significant maiden resource we could have for the Bekisopa project. But also because of these good deep holes and the intercepts, the geologists have a lot of work to do to get on top of those sample preparations and everything else, and then get the sample sent to Perth ALS laboratory for assaying. The logistics getting from Madagascar to Perth is going through Europe, into Paris, Germany, sometimes via London to get to Perth. And in recent weeks, because of the complications in the logistics network that we've all seen in our daily lives, it's been impacting the delivery times of samples sent from Madagascar, which was taking about a week to 10 days. It's now taking 2 to 3 weeks. So everything is being pushed out as a consequence of the impacts on logistics through COVID. So unfortunately, we've missed our first target, which was the JORC resource by the end of the year. But all being well, we'll have a JORC resource in the new year, early in the new year, and it should be quite a significant resource as we've drilled those extensive number of metres over the last 2 years. I'm happy to take some questions at the end on that if there's still some clarification needed. But next, I'd just like to go through a few slides so they're all on the same page of how we're seeing the project for Akora at Bekisopa shaping up. What we're seeing now is that it's a high-grade DSO, direct ship ore, iron ore project. Oh dear, here we go. This happened last, oh, there we go, sorry. I think we all understand the forward-looking statements. So Bekisopa is in south central Madagascar. It's 250 kilometres from the port of Toliara there on the southwest coast of Madagascar. It's not far from highway number 7, and there's potential there for us to truck ore from Bekisopa to Toliara in the initial years. When we first visited Bekisopa, what you saw in the top left-hand image there is outcropping iron ore. The rock chip samples have shown that to be 67% iron on average and comprises both hematite and magnetite iron ore. So that's what's there, and we can see that as being a potential product for our project. We also see in the trenches, as is on the right-hand side image there, iron ore at depth. And that trench there in the south has got some 2 to 3 metres of depth there, and you can see both lump iron ore, but also fine iron ore in that trench. And the drill holes that we've drilled over the last year have confirmed the grades there, and we're seeing some very high grades up to 68%. So quite promising results as we continue the drilling and get the assays in. And also should remember, we have those future projects of Tra Marina and Ambody Lava to progress in the coming years. So looking more closely at the 2021 drilling campaign, it was designed to add volume to those 12 holes that we drilled in 2020, which confirmed that the iron mineralisation at Bekisopa was not just on surface in that outcrop, it was at depths, and depths to 100 metres and more. So this year, in the 5 months, we've completed 51 drill holes for some 5,100 metres drilled. The drilling, as you can see on the image on the right-hand side, has gone from north to the centre and south in quite expansive grids there. And as the announcement of last week, in the north, some very deep holes there, down to 250 metres. And more recently, where we've finished here in the south with those last 4 or 5 yellow dots amongst the green, depths down to 200 metres when we've finished drilling. So what are the highlights from the drilling program so far? We're seeing 67% iron at surface. That's very high grade iron. You remember back, the benchmark grade is 62%. At surface, we're seeing 67%. We're seeing mineralisation downhole to 250 metres in depth. That equates to about a vertical depth of over 200 metres. We're seeing widths across strike, particularly in the southern zone there where that grid is, in excess of 650 metres across strike, and true thicknesses in the intercepts, 50, 100, and more recently in the north, 138 metres. If you look at those drill holes there along that 6 kilometre strike, we've only drilled less than 30% of that length or that area of that 6 kilometre strike. So it's looking good from this first resource to be a significant resource, both in grade and in volume, but potentially it's going to be 3 times greater than that because we've only drilled 30% of the 6 kilometre strike. What we're seeing from the drilling, from the magnetic susceptibility readings and the photographs, and then from the assays, we're seeing at surface weathered massive iron mineralisation. And here's 2 drill core boxes with some of those drill core photographs. This hole at the top there on the left-hand side from drill hole 31 in the south, from surface to 6.2 metres, very high grades, averaging 68.2% iron. In the south at drill hole 29, from surface to 6.2 metres, again, very high grades, 66.8% iron. This is predominantly hematite, but also magnetite and some goethite. And we believe this is going to be a direct ship iron ore of very, very high grades. The other mineralisations that we're seeing at depth are what we're calling massive iron mineralisation, where the grade is high and there's a significant amount of iron, and then coarse disseminated iron mineralisation, which is the image there on the bottom left-hand side. So looking at the massive, we're seeing in the central zones, but also in the north and the south, at depths of 60 and 80 metres, as shown by this drill core box for hole number 38 in this year's drilling program, grades up to 64% iron at depths of 80 metres. So potentially, depending on how this iron mineralisation is mined and how it looks, it could be lump and fines at 64%, or it might need some processing to upgrade that even further. We also have coarse disseminated iron mineralisation, as shown in drill hole number 1, the first drill hole we drilled last year. This is at sort of 56 to 60 metres. The grey there is the iron mineralisation. The white is a calcium silicate country rock. Average grade here of 45% iron. And we know that this upgrades very readily at a coarse crush. So they're the 3 different sorts of mineralisations we're seeing. Most interestingly is this very high grade at surface in the weathered zone. We did some processing trials, and we've spoken about this before, where we crushed the drill core to 2 millimeters and processed that using low intensity magnetic separation, a simple conventional process tool for separating iron mineralisation. In the weathered zone, this material was readily upgraded from 60% iron to 67% product grade fines, very high grade fines, which gets a premium above benchmark at 62 to 65%, and then a premium above that for the 67% high grade. For the massive and coarse disseminated products, this also upgraded readily at 2 millimeter crush, average product grade of 63% iron, a very clean, low impurity, high grade product, as you can see in that image on the right hand side, low phos, 0.04, 2.7 silicon, 1.2 alumina on average. Very good grades, outstanding quality after crushing drill core at 2 millimeters. Just like to focus on some of the drill holes now so that you better understand the amount of work we have in front of us because of the results we've got from the deep drilling. This is the cross section from last week's announcement on the northern drill holes. And what it's showing is that the ore body is dipping to the west quite nicely, great shape for an open pit ore body there, and is continuing well below 200 meters below surface. It's a significant continuous iron mineralization from surface, as you can see in that sort of pinky light brown color of the ore body there, to 250 meters depth at least, and considerably more we believe, and intercepts of 138 meters downhole and 115 meters downhole. So the geologists that we have at site, and we've brought more geologists to site to get on top of this work as quick as possible, are having to log that drill hole number 52, that 138 meters, every meter, doing the testing, doing the magnetic susceptibility, photographs, logging it, and then splitting it in ready for preparation. So a lot of work to be done because of the extent of these intercepts at depth. We've seen this photo in the south. I'm just showing it again to give you an idea of, again, the amount of work, but the continuity we're seeing of the ore body in the southern areas. High grade surface iron mineralization, a continuous thickness there. It's like a snake going from east to west. That's over 50 meters true thickness. And that cross section is some 650 plus meters. So a extensive ore body, high grades at surface, and a low stripping ratio for an open pit mining operation. So in summary, the drilling results are outstanding, and we've got a lot more results to come, which we'll be reporting on in coming weeks. At surface, we're seeing 8 meters at 68% iron, which is just fabulous, when the benchmark, remember, is only 62%. So we get quite a premium for that in terms of the lump and fines ore. 6 meters at 67, 15 meters at 65, and as I said, potentially direct ship ore. At depths, we're also seeing good grades and continuity in intercepts, and we're certainly looking forward to see the average grade in that drill hole in the north, where the intercept was 138 meters. That's going to be quite impressive. The processing trials, as I just mentioned in a slide or two earlier, very good upgrading at a 2 millimeter crush, 67% from material in the weathered zone, 63% from the massive and coarse, and very low impurities. So what does it mean for Bekisopa? Well, we've only drilled less than 30% of the 6 kilometre strike north to south. We're proving up a significant resource capable of producing initially high grade lump and fines iron ore, but in the longer term, high grade fines, due to the ability for this material to be readily upgraded at least at a 2 millimeter coarse crushing size to produce fines. So for Bekisopa, we're anticipating that over the life of this project, over the life of the operating mine, there's 4 products. Initially, the outcrop, the high-grade DSO lump and fines, where we know the magnetite is grading 66% on average. The magnetite 68% on average, and the hematite 66% on average. Then we've got the very high-grade surface zone, which with each assay is a growing area and volume in the Bekisopa area. This will be DSO lump and fines. If you remember back to that trench photo at the start, in that area, there is quite large lumps of ore and also the fines. So crushing and screening to produce lump and fine product there. And then from the lower grade material, a fines product can be produced. In the surface zone, a high grade fines grading at least 65%, if not better, and at depth, better than benchmark from what we're seeing, upgrading from 40% type material, 35% type material to a high grade clean iron ore fines. So potentially the outlook for Bekisopa's production will be in the initial years from the outcrop. As you can see from the image on the screen here, and I think it's also the image that's behind me today, the surface of the Bekisopa strike is covered in these coarse lumps of magnetite and hematite. So for the first 2 years, that'll be a matter of just digging that up, crushing it, screening it, and shipping it off as lump and fines iron ore product. And then say from years 2 to 10, we would be looking to mine the very high grade surface weathered zone, where we're seeing grades as high as 68%, but also 64 and 65, which is still very good grades that can be dug up and shipped out potentially as direct ship ore after crushing and screening. So conventional mining, crushing and screening practices, producing high grade DSO lump and fines in that first possibly 8 or 10 years, and it could be more with more drilling. We just don't yet understand the extent and the size of the resource, but it's looking to be quite substantial. And from what we see around the world is that DSO operations typically have low mining costs and low CapEx and OpEx costs. So that is a good way for us to start to get the project going. So thank you for your time on those slides. And I'm Peter, more than happy to take some questions.
No worries. Thank you, Paul. It's pretty, look, these presentations you've been giving us consistently just show regular, outstanding iron results. So I'm hoping it's starting to sink in. And there are some good questions here today. I'm going to start off with the first one. We've probably been over this, but it's good to reiterate. How far from the port is Bekisopa? And can you provide a summary of the logistics scenario in trucking the material once it's mined?
Sure. No, look, it's a good question, and it's a question I understand people are interested in. We're 250 kilometres from the port of Toliara, and that is a substantial port. It's also a port that I believe is going to be upgraded in the near future, the next few years, as other operations in the area from Base Resources, but also from NextSource, are looking to more than likely move their product through that port. We would look to truck from Bekisopa on an all-weather road that we'll need to make from the site to the National Highway, then along the National Highway to Toliara. Trucking 1 or 2 million tonnes, maybe more, is a practical and cost-effective way to move material, particularly lump and fines in those early years. It's practiced right across the world in not just iron ore, but many commodities, whether it's coal or others, but also in grains and things like that. So that's what we'd be looking to do. We had hoped at the end of this year, in the 3rd or 4th quarter of this year, to get some experts over to, travel the road, to look at the opportunity for doing that transporting by truck. But unfortunately, Madagascar's only opened up and we haven't been able to get people in, but that's something we'll do first thing next year. So we've got a more clear picture of what's involved in the transportation to Toliara and indicative costs and the practicalities of it all. But again, it's what people do everywhere. It's what people are doing in Northern Australia. They're trucking 400 plus kilometres at the moment. And one of the advantages of Madagascar is that while the trucks will be the same in terms of fuel and in terms of maintenance, the labour component will be significantly less in Madagascar, which is going to be an advantage over other similar iron ore operations.
So in terms of costs, I guess that sort of analysis takes place in a scoping study. Do you have any rough back of the envelope ideas about your production costs and shipping costs?
Yeah, look, no, not really, Peter, because the restrictions on us in terms of doing that are quite harsh from the ASX and ASX, and I can understand why they are doing that. The best thing for me to say is that we can see a startup that is processing the outcropping material in the very high grade surface weathered zone, where we're seeing grades 67% and the like, mining that, crushing and screening it, and then transporting it by truck to port. So very simple operation, very low capital and operating costs in the startup, and depending on the iron ore price going forward, it's going to be a very healthy margin. So that for me is the best way to look at it. The capital cost will be crushing, screening, putting it on a truck, a couple of shovels and several mining trucks. It is going to be a low cost operation, without a doubt.
And that sort of covers part of this next question that's come through about what is the appetite for this type of DSO, and is there potential for offtakes to be signed prior to mining, given it's a small but high grade material?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. An offtake is quite likely. We have spoken with people. We're looking at doing those sorts of arrangements, and those discussions have started. And really, they're waiting to see how the JORC resource shapes up, because that really is the truth, isn't it? After all the drilling, we've seen the assay results and everything else, the size of the intercepts. It's all looking very encouraging. But then when the resource geologists put all of that together and do their mathematics and the like, that will tell us with confidence how big the resource is, and the grades, and also the other tests that we're doing in conjunction. So I think there could be a real opportunity for an offtake or a royalty of some kind to be done at Bekisopa, and that would be very good, because those sorts of transactions enable you to have the funding to do scoping studies and the like without diluting the shareholders. So I think we'd certainly look to do something like that if we can.
And that starts to get some momentum here too for the company. Could you see some early cash flow from that surface material that might then help fund the greater capital requirement for the overall project?
Yeah, very much so. It's interesting. From last year's drilling, we had a picture, and as we've got more information and more assaying, the picture is becoming bigger and better. It's been absolutely wonderful. From that quite extensive high-grade surface zone and from the outcropping material, low operating and capital costs to get that going. Even at today's iron ore price, that will deliver a very good margin, and therefore cash flow to fund further capital if that's required to increase the production possibilities for Bekisopa.
And this is all due to the unique high grade at surface nature of this particular deposit, which really lends itself to an early stage project rather than something we have to wait many years for if it was much larger.
Yes, yeah. So look, the photo behind me with the outcrop, that really is bringing the shovels, pick it up, crush it and screen it and ship it out. And then the surface weathered zone, we saw the quality of that material. It's going to be very similar for a number of years, at a 1, 2, 3 million tonne per annum production rate. So it should be quite good.
And given the resource to be due in the first quarter next year, Paul, how long would it take you to get into some sort of scoping study or desktop study?
Yeah, look, my feeling is, and we have to have this discussion with the board, but look, we're all on the same page. That is the next piece of the jigsaw. We've been doing all this work and building up the jigsaw, and it's giving us a nice clear picture. The resource study confirms the magnitude of the opportunity. We're believing it's going to be very solid, very big. and therefore we'll get stuck into the scoping studies, pretty well quick smart. And the first step, as I said earlier, will be the logistics study, because I think everyone appreciates that's a key step, but it's what everyone has to encounter in this sort of industry, because unfortunately the Pilbara, while it's wonderful, is not at the coast. It's 350, 400 kilometres from the coast. Brazil, I think, is 700 to 1,000 kilometres from the coast. So at 250, yes, we've got some work to do, but it's been done before, and we can learn the lessons from those.
We might end with a question here on the overall market. We're seeing iron ore prices at what we might call cyclical lows.
Yes.
However, Chinese coking coal demand is still through the roof. So do you see that as an indication that there could be soon a rebound in prices?
Yeah, look, it is an interesting puzzle, isn't it? Because you'd think if the demand has dropped right off, that the demand for coking coal, which is the other main ingredient in steel making in the blast furnace, would also decline. So maybe the Chinese are, going through their stockpiles of iron ore and producing steel at a good rate. However, the production numbers coming out of China have shown that the steel production actually has declined in the last few months. And you've got to wonder whether that's to prepare the cities in China for the Winter Olympics and make sure the skies are lovely and blue. And then once the Olympics are over, things will pick up and steel production in China will increase in the new year to meet the demand that's required for those growing cities across China. Look, it's hard to know unless you're really involved in those sort of numbers crunching and observing and so on. But people are trying to work out why it has dropped so readily. But the expectation is that things should pick up, fairly quickly in the new year. Once we get through COVID, but also China settles back down and gets through the Winter Olympics and the like, and starts producing again.
Coking coal prices are obviously a good indication for the observers to watch if they're looking at iron ore prices as well. So we shall keep an eye on that too.
Yeah. It's hard to know what the future is going to be, but look, steel is the fundamental building block for everything in our consumer society. So we believe that even at these prices, which is pretty good average long-term prices, around the $100, but there's potential for it to be higher going forward.
And the markets pull for this particular product out of Madagascar straight up into countries like India and non-China customers. Look,
one of the beauties of where Madagascar is located off the southeastern coast of Africa is that we're close to India, which has also got a very rapidly growing steel industry to meet their growth demands. We've also got the Middle East, and the Middle East likes the magnetite component of the deposit because that goes into their gas-fired steel-making facilities in a number of those Middle Eastern states. So a real good opportunity there with a shorter transport distance, which has to be a good thing. But then again, because of the quality of this, it's going to be wanted in China and it's going to be wanted in Japan because those countries looking to reduce their operating costs, reduce the environmental impacts, would prefer to be taking the higher grade iron ore. So I think we're well placed going forward as we progress the project, and the steel demand just keeps happening in those countries.
It's been a pretty good year, a lot of work, and a lot of good successful milestones achieved, Paul, and I think shareholders should be pretty happy with where the company is positioned right now. Just one last question on the cash responsibilities for the company. How are you seeing that settling at the moment?
Look, we raised $5 million at listing in December last year. We put forward a budget that was front-loaded to get this drilling done so we could truly understand the extent of the opportunity at Bekisopa, and that's what we've done. So we actually have, we planned for 4,000 plus meters, we've done 5,000 meters, logistics and all of the camp setups and all of those things have been within budget. We've also brought forward some work from 2022 into this Bekisopa program. So look, we're on track compared to our budget, and the expenditure next year is going to be nothing like it's been this year because the drilling, the analysis, the assaying by the laboratories will all have been done. It will be study time to absorb all of the data. So yes, while it looks like we've eaten a lot of the money, and we have eaten a lot of money, that was the plan. And then in the second year, it's going to be the study time to understand what the opportunity is for Bekisopa and nail some of those questions like logistics and operating costs and the like.
Terrific. Thanks, Paul. Given the world COVID environment, I don't think you've wasted any time at all, and it's been a great year. So thank you for your update today.
No
thank
trouble.
you to all the shareholders and people who have tuned in. If you have any further questions, please email them to me, Peter at nwrcommunications.com.au, and I'll make sure Paul gets them. And we look forward to answering them. And we also look forward to the next update from you soon, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your help and support.